I got exited for some reason.
Yeah. Looks like it is a new one this time. Some changes happened, looks like. I don't see the option to record as well.
You don't see the option for what?
I don't see an option to record.
Oh,
I kept live YouTube, but I don't see the option to record.
there's one option for record to this computer.
Where you see that? Yeah.
Yeah, and the lower toolbar, there's
Yeah,
a
that is you because I don't know for some reason I don't see it. Maybe it is as a co-host you're seeing.
no, it shows you as the host and me as the co-host.
Yeah, but
And
I don't see the
there is
record in the lower button.
Prabhu, I'm seeing Prime Kishore Prabhu, I'm seeing a message. The content of the meeting is being sent to a third party like that. Are
YouTube.
you?
It is in YouTube. It is streaming already.
Oh, that is why that message. Huh?
Yeah. Prabhu, can you record it? Vairi Prabhu?
So it says record to this computer.
To this computer. Yeah, I need that.
Should I do
And
that?
it, yeah, if you can, please. Yeah, because
Okay.
I don't see it. We'll try to figure out what is the
Okay.
issue.
Okay, I started the recording.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for joining us. We will start with the Mangalacharan. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udire Ashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Neshtaki Om Agyanti Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधारा श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम श्रीपदाय कृष्ण कृष्ण भूतले श्रीमद् भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी प्रचारेशतारिणे. So we will resume our discussion from sixth canto, first chapter, verse 61. This is the concluding part of the chapter, wherein the Vishnudutas, they are describing the cause of the downfall of Ajamel. And so verse 61, Rishvatam kamaliptena bahuna parirambitam Jagamahritshayavasam sahaseva vimohitaha. The Shudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing the prostitute. When Ajamil saw her, the dormant lusty desire in his heart awakened, and in illusion, he fell under their control. So Prabhupada mentions that smearing the body with turmeric attracts the lusty desires of the opposite sex. The word kam liptena indicates that the Shudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body. So the Yamdutas are making the point that Ajamel had always had lusty desires. So in verses 52 to 54, they had made a similar point that Ajamel had lusty desires, and because of this sight that he beholded of a prostitute and a Shudra embracing, those desires now became from dormant to active. 62. Stambhayanatmanatmanam yavad sattvam yatha shrutam na shashak samadatum manomadan vepitam. As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of his knowledge, of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires. But because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. So Stambhayan means that he valiantly tried, he fought, or he struggled to control his mind. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned that mind is controlled by the intelligence, and then ultimately the intelligence is controlled by abiding the instructions of the Vedas. So that's what Ajamil did. That he tried to control his instinctive desires by remembering the instructions of the scriptures. So his mind was torn between the Shastric intelligence and the lust that was awakened in him. Finally, lust wins, and it will take control of Ajamel till the time of his death at the age of 88. In one of his lectures, Radhanath Maharaj mentions that Maya works 24/7. Like she does not have any holidays. She does not take vacation. Her goal is to keep the jiva in the material world. That's the service Krishna has given her, and she works very, very hard at it. Herself, by her agents, both living and non-living in the material world. Therefore, one should not be surprised that she will almost always win. So one of the analogies that is given is that if you enter the boxing ring with Maya, she will always defeat you. The only way to defeat her, that you enter the boxing ring with Krishna. And whereas Maya can defeat you, Krishna can defeat Maya. Prabhupada mentioned that because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the personality of Godhead through devotional service. Verse 63, Tannimat smara vyaja graha grasta vichetanaha tam eva manasa dhyayan swadharma virarama. In the same way that the sun and moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahman lost all his good sense. Taking advantage of the situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time, he took her as a servant in his house and abandoned all the regulative principles of a Brahman. So Ajamil did not immediately react to the situation. When he saw what he saw, he quietly went away. But his mind became absorbed in what he saw. So from thinking comes feeling, from feeling comes willing, and from willing comes doing. That's why there are so many injunctions in which the devotees are recommended to not even engage in the thinking part of it. Because as it becomes more and more mature, then it becomes more and more difficult to curtail it. So the impression that Ajamil had, he kept thinking about it. And then gradually that matured into feeling. He began to experience vicariously what the Shudra was experiencing. And then willing means that then he started making plans to make it happen. And then finally he executed on the plan, which is that then he engaged the prostitute as the servant. So the analogy used by the Yamaduta is Graha Grasto Vichetanaha. That just like Rahu eclipses the sun or the moon. So they are lower planets, but circumstantially they are able to eclipse the higher planets. Now it also indicates that this is a temporary or maybe a temporary situation. Because while Rahu eclipses the sun or the moon, the eclipse lasts for a while and then goes away. So there is also this understanding that this situation is a temporary situation. In commenting on this verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that when Ajamil tried to protect himself from his thoughts, he used two things. He used dharma, and then he used the knowledge of the scriptures. So essentially he used karma and jnana. But both of them were ineffective. And ultimately, only by the process of bhakti was he able to rectify the situation. So Chakravarti Pal said this shows that the comparative and the inherent strengths of karma, jnana and bhakti. How bhakti succeeds where karma and jnana failed. Okay, next verse, 64. तामिव तोष्यामाशा पितॄणार्थेन यावता ग्राम्यैर्मनोरमहे कामे प्रसीदते यथा तथा. Thus, Ajamil began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations, so that she could remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahmanical activities to satisfy the prostitute. So the second statement kind of explains the first one, that Ajamil as a Brahman was sustaining himself by Brahmanical activities. And because he became contaminated, he gave up all the Brahmanical activities. Then the question is that how was he satisfying the prostitute? So initially he was satisfying her by the wealth that he had inherited from his father. It's actually mentioned at other place that he actually kicked out his parents and his wife. So he had a chaste wife and he had old parents, but he kicked them out. He took forcible possession of their wealth, and then he used that to satisfy. When that wealth ran out, then he began to commit theft and different illicit activities to get wealth. So by illicit sex, three things are destroyed: character, position, and wealth. So we see all these three things happening in the case of Ajamil. Prabhupada writes that one should be satisfied with his material life, with his material wife, for even a slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna conscious Grihastha should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife and be peaceful simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So this is something that actually is to some extent autobiographical for Srila Prabhupada. That when Srila Prabhupada married, then he did not have a good experience with his wife. Their natures were not compatible. And at one point, Srila Prabhupada actually approached his father, Gaur Mohan De, and those days, having more than one wives was not very uncommon. So he approached his father asking, at least with this proposal. And Gaur Mohan De, at that time, he gave Prabhupada the spiritual perspective. Firstly, that be satisfied with the wife that you have, and he actually said, it is good that you have a wife that is not too pleasing to you. It will help you remember Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada, to his eternal and to our eternal benefit, he actually did follow on that recommendation. Verse 66. Vipram swabharyam aprodham kule mahatilam vitam visharjarichat papa swarinyapanga vidadhi. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glance of the prostitute, the victimized Brahman engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife, who came from a respectable Brahman family. So we see the Yamdutas glorifying Ajmer's wife as beautiful and young. So they address her as Lambitam. So Lambitam means that the marriage was done according to the Vedic injunctions with the blessings of the elders. So what we see over here is that so there are people who have a general state of being lusty, and that is bad. But much worse than that is people who have specific case of being lusty. So protection against specific lust is much more difficult than protection against general lust. So dharma and jnana, they can protect a person from being generally lusty by virtue of the the uh, the do's and the don'ts, by virtue of the Vedic injunctions, but they cannot protect against a situation when one person becomes infatuated by another person. So we see that Ajmel's wife was young and beautiful, and also very qualified. Also Swajati. He was from a good Brahman family. She was from a respectful Brahman family. If he was experiencing general lust, he could have satisfied it through his wife. But Ajmel's lust was specifically focused on the prostitute. So later on, we see that there is no indication that Ajmel ever gave up the association of the prostitute for other women. So it is not that he became so lusty that he started visiting other prostitutes and started keeping multiple wives, but his lust was completely focused on one woman. That was this prostitute, even though the Acharyas comment that the prostitute continued to associate with other men. So even though she was not chaste to him, he gave the association of his chaste wife, and he was completely chaste to her. So this kind of specific lust cannot be subdued by karma or jnana. Because in one case, it is like you turn the light on and there is illumination in the room. And in the other case, there is a laser-like beam. And Ajmal was in the second situation. So that kind can only be protected by taking shelter of bhakti. Verse 66. Yatastata chapananye nyayato nyayatu dhanam bhavarakshaya kutumbinya kutumbam mandadirayam. Although born of a Brahmin family, this rascal, bereft of intelligence, because of the prostitutes' association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitutes' sons and daughter. So, the Yamdutas, they are giving a quick synopsis of the what happened to Ajmer. So earlier on, he was maintaining her through the money of his parents. When that ran out, then he started stealing. So somehow or the other, regardless, properly or improperly. So he started stealing, he started killing. By one way or the other, he started getting money. And the phrase that is used over here, that he used it to maintain the prostitutes' sons and daughters, which means that not all the children that Ajamel was maintaining were his own. Because she continued to associate with other men, then she also bore their children. But Ajamel was so infatuated by her that it did not stop him from doing all the things that he did, leaving his wife, leaving his parents, spending all his wealth, stealing. So that is the nature of the infatuation that Ajamel was under. Verse 67. Yaddasau shastram ullangya savecharyati grahita avratata chiram kalam aghayura suchirir malat. This Brahman irresponsibly spent his long time transgressing all the rules and regulations of the Holy Scriptures, living extravagantly and eating food prepared by a prostitute. Therefore, he is full of sins. He is unclean and is addicted to forbidden activities. So, Parikshit Maharaj may ask that this this momentary infatuation of Ajamel, why did it last his entire lifetime? And the Yamdutas give three reasons: that because of adharma, that because he started committing sinful activities, the result of those activities is that one has now the desire to commit more sinful activities. The second is association. So it says he was associating with impious people, which is prostitute in this case, in a mood of lust. And the third is that he was eating food contaminated by the consciousness of the cook. So explicitly they said that eating food prepared by a prostitute. So these three things, they kind of regenerated themselves. Because of sins, one performed more sins. Because of asadhu sat, one became more inclined for adharma. And because of eating contaminated food, the consciousness was contaminated. And then one associated with sinful people and one performed sinful activities. So Ajamel really became helpless, like a puppet being drawn by this spider's web. Verse 68. Tattenam danpane saksham krita kilbisham neshyamo krita nirvesham yatra dandena shuddhyate. This man, Ajamel, did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. So now the Yamdutas are summarizing why they are present over there. So they gave back history of Ajamel's fall down, Ajamel's sinful activities, Now, they are saying that he did not perform atonement. So, the one way to negate the effect of sinful activities that the Yamdutas know about is Prayashchit. And they know that he did not perform Prayashchit. So, they say he performed sins, but he did not atone. Therefore, to the extent of his sinful acts, he needs to be punished. And ultimately, they are saying Shuddhyati. So, it also indicates the benevolent nature of Yamraj and Yamadut. So, they are not beating somebody up just for the sake of their own pleasure, but ultimately because of Shuddhyati, because they want to purify the person. So in this context, there is a Puranic pastime that talks a little bit about the previous life of Ajamel. So in his previous life, Ajamel was a very strict brahmachari. And once he was in the river taking a bath, and because of the flow of the current, he began to drown. So there was a woman who was present at that time on the shores of the river, and then she saw Ajamel in his previous life that he was drowning. So she jumped into the water and rescued him. Then Ajamel became very angry at her. And he said that I am a strict brahmachari. How dare you touch me? So he became so angry at her that he cursed her that you have acted like a prostitute by touching a man who was not your husband. So may you become a prostitute. And because the woman did not have any bad intentions, she also became angry and she said that as a counter course, when I become the prostitute, I will become the cause of your downfall. So that's how this played out. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the first chapter, sixth canto. And I'll stop here and see if there is any comments or questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I was thinking, Prabhuji, like as you are explaining that Ajamil not went for any other woman, even though he was grossly lusty and became all sinful activities. Uh, I was just thinking back of my mind, like in today's world, how these kind of things are projected as, a great love love story, or you know, uh, you know, liberal thinking kind of things. But how Bhagavatam, gives that holistic picture of how he went into sinful activities to the extent of killing people, and also how the woman is not chaste to him. Still, he is continuing. It shows his level of blindness to see the facts. So,
Yes, Prabhu, you're right. Okay, so if there are no more.
Hare Krishna, just one comment, or maybe you can confirm that to me. Was it?
Can't hear you, Prabhu.
You can't hear me, or you can hear me?
Can't hear you clearly.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm using the computer. I'm putting in earpiece. Anyway, now can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Now, just a confirmation from you about the name of Narayan. Who decided to give the name Narayan to his son? Was it on the advice of some Brahmana that came to visit him, or he gave the name himself?
Prabhupada mentions that it was customary at that point. In those days, it was customary to name the children after. It's not that Ajamel was particularly attached to Lord Narayan, but in India, at least in my generation and previous to my generation, almost all the names are some names of of gods. in the next generation, we see this, like, different kinds of names coming. Some of the names don't mean anything, or some of them are, are like different names. But even as early as 50 years ago, it was just customary to name the children. Doesn't mean they were highly spiritual, but it was just lokaniti to give the children names of gods.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Regarding the general lust, can you hear me?
Hmm?
Okay. Regarding the general lust and the specific lust, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, and first time I'm learning that. I thought lust is always lust in common to everything, and I do so see that that is quite possible. It may not be very grossly affecting one's life. I can speak for myself actually, but at a lesser level, as a lesser degree, it does take very great endeavor to give up certain things, whereas other things one can easily get away from it. Now, give up things. So that makes sense. The specific lesson, general lesson. I didn't realize that that there is something like that. So thank you for that. I just thought some things is very difficult to give up in our life.
Yeah. Even I have personal experience. When we came to Krishna consciousness, and then I was used to drinking 1 cup of tea every day when I came back from work. It was very difficult for me to give it. And I did not have, like, even at that time, I wasn't like drinking liquor or anything like that. So that wasn't a problem. But that 1 cup of tea, that stayed with me for a very long time. So attachments to specific things or specific people, um, they're a lot more difficult to give up, as opposed to trying to orient yourself in a general direction. Thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Okay,
Hare
so
Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Prabhu, I had this question, when you spoke about culturally in those times, people were named after the Lord. Perhaps you mentioned this, I must have missed it. What does Ajamila mean?
I have not mentioned it, and it was a question that I was thinking myself also. I did not get understanding of the name of Ajamil. I was actually trying to derive it myself. That Aja means what does Aja mean? Aja means one who is unborn, right?
Right.
Right. So Aja I could figure out, but the second part of the name I could not. But I don't remember seeing anywhere the meaning of his name. Okay, so let's move on to the second chapter, which is Ajamel delivered by the Vishnu Dutas. It says 49 verses, and the um, the verse is essentially the chapter essentially is clustered around the Vishnu Duta's glorification of the holy name, right? So so we will start verse 1. श्रीभद्रायणेरुवाच एवं ते भगवद्दूता यं दूता विभाषितम् उपाधरायत तान् राजन् प्रत्याहूर्नयकोविद. Sukadev Goswami said, "My dear king, the servants of Lord Vishnu are always very expert in logic and arguments. After hearing the statements of the Yamadutas, they reply as follows." So, in 6 verses, we will see the Vishnu Dutas refuting the points made by the Yamaduta. Verse 2. Sri Vishnuduta Uchuhu Aho Kashtam Dharmadrasham Adharma Sparshate Savam Yatra Dandayeshva Papeshu Dandoye driyate vrataha. The Vishnu Dutta said, Alas, how painful it is that irreligion is being introduced into an assembly where religion should be maintained. Indeed, those in charge of maintaining the religious principles are needlessly punishing a sinless, unpunishable person. So, what do the Vishnu Dutta say? Aho kashtam. So, aho is in Sanskrit is a sign of shock. Like in that famous verse where the liberation of Putna is described, right? Where there it starts with aho, that how surprising it is that somebody as sinful as her became liberated. So similarly, the Vishnu Dutas, they are expressing genuine shock over here. So what are they saying? That those who are the protectors of religion are themselves acting irreligiously. So what will happen to the people who are subjected to this injustice? Kashtam. Right? When the protector of religions are irreligious, then what will happen to the people who are supposed to be protected by this religion? So the Yamdutas may say that who are you to criticize us? And why are you criticizing us? And the Vishnudutas say that because adharma is contaminating the assembly of those who judge dharma. Because the people who are supposed to distinguish between dharma and adharma are not able to do so. And they are seeing dharma as adharma. Because in an assembly where punishment is only allocated to those who have sinned, we are observing that it is being allocated to a sinless person. That is why we are criticizing you. So Srila Prabhupada says that while the Vishnudutas were shocked by the conduct of the Yamdutas, in the current age of Kali, this is more the norm than the exception. And he says, because of this, Vaishnavas go out to preach according to the real standards of religious principles. But unfortunately, because of the influence of Kali Yuga, Vaishnavas who have dedicated their lives through preaching the glories of the Lord are sometimes harassed and punished by the courts on false charges of disturbing the peace. The Prabhupada is reflecting on the fact that in more than one places, ISKCON was brought up in court. In New York, there was a case by the parents of a devotee. They had sued for brainwashing. And other places, the ISKCON was sued. So Prabhupada is reflecting on that mood. Verse 3. Prajanam petaro yecha shastra sadhva samaha yadi syate suvaishampyam kamyanti sharanam prajaha. A king or governmental official should be so well qualified that he acts as a father, maintainer, and protector of the citizens because of affection and love. He should give the citizens good advice and instructions according to the standard scriptures and should be equal to everyone. Yamraj does this, for he is the supreme master of justice, and so do those who follow in his footsteps. However, if such persons become polluted and exhibit partiality by punishing an innocent, blameless person, where will the citizens go to take shelter for their maintenance and security? So, the Vishnu Dutas are doing two things. One thing is that they're careful not to offend everyone. So they're saying that, in effect, that because you are acting improperly does not necessarily mean that everybody is acting improperly, and especially Yamraj. So they're respectful to him. So they say Yamraj does this for he is the supreme master of justice. Right? So they want to make sure that they're affixing blame to the poor Yamdutas and not to everybody else, specifically not to Lord Yamraj. Now, another meaning of this verse is exactly the opposite, that the Vishnu Dutas are not really blaming the Yamdutas, but they're blaming Yamraj. So, looking at it from that perspective, when we read this verse, we see that the Vishnu Dutas are talking about the quality of the leaders, that they should be qualified and properly situated. They should be like a father, maintainer, and protector. They should have affection to the followers. They should give good advice and instructions according to the scriptures. And they should be impartial and equal to everyone. So, in a way, they are saying that because Yamraj is not following these four aspects, his followers are also contaminated. Because he does not have affection, because he did not give good advice according to scriptures, because he's showing partiality, so you're acting in that way. And so that is one understanding. The other is they are saying that you, the Yamadutas, you are also leaders in your own right, and you are displaying this depraved qualities. So then they are affixing the blame on Yamadutas and not on Yamraj. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that recently this has been proven in America, where the president had to be condemned and dragged down from his post by the citizens. So Srila Prabhupada is commenting on that aspect where he considers the Vishnu Dutas to be criticizing Yamraj. And an incident that it kind of dates the time that Prabhupada is writing this purport. He's referring to the impeachment of President Nixon in 1973. So this is around the little after that he's writing this purport. So it's fresh and new as the Prabhupada refers to it. Okay, verse 4. Yadyadachrati shreyanitarastаттadhyate sa yad pramanam kurute lokastadanuvartate. The mass of people follow the example of a leader in society and imitate his behavior. They accept as evidence whatever the leader accepts. Right? So you can understand that this verse is almost identical to Yatyatachati Shesha Tatta Devata Rajana Sayad Pramanam Kurute Lokastadanuvartate. So only the second line changes to Itaras Tatta Dehate. So this appears in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 21. So we see that in case of Mahaprabhu, when he was a sannyasi, then he was very careful to lead a very frugal life. Even though as the personality of Godhead, he did not have to. And his followers would be very much pained. But very much so that others would not be misled by him. He was very careful to follow all the tenets of sannyas ashram. So Prabhupada in the purport writes that the Vishnu Dutas feared that if such irreligious acts were allowed, the management of human society would be spoiled. And then he says the Hare Krishna movement is the right movement for ameliorating the fallen condition of the human society. Therefore, governments and public leaders in every part of the world should support this movement and completely rectify humanity's sinful condition. So this was a very strong mood in Prabhupada, that this Yajadashati Shrestras, he would always try and approach the leaders. He would try and approach the mayors or the sheriffs. In India, he met the president. He tried to meet the prime minister. So not because he was attracted by their position or power, but with this understanding of Yajadashati Shrestras. That was one reason he came to America, because he said that initially the focus was to go to England or London, but even at that time the power of America had become very strong, and that's one reason why Prabhupada said that this is the country where that the whole world will follow, and that's why he decided to come to the US. Verse 5 and 6. यस्यांकिशीरध्याया लोकस्वपति निर्वृतः स्वयं धर्मम् अधर्मं वा नहि वेदयता पशुः स कथं नयर्पितात्मनां कृतमैत्रम् अचेतनं विश्रम्भन्यो भूतनां सग्रनुदोग्धमर्हति. People in general are not very advanced in knowledge by which to discriminate between religion and irreligion. The innocent, unenlightened citizen is like an ignorant animal, sleeping in peace with its head on the lap of its master, faithfully believing in the master's protection. If a leader is actually kind hearted and deserves to be the object of a living entity's faith, how can he punish or kill a foolish person who has fully surrendered in good faith and friendship? So this verse speaks about betrayal of trust, that people have faith in leader, but if the leader cheats them, then what is the hope for them, and how sinful it is for the leader? Prabhupada said that we actually saw this during the partition days in India, that although Hindus and Muslims were living together peacefully, manipulation by politicians suddenly aroused feelings of hatred. And so this is one of the darkest chapters in Indian history, where really a handful of leaders, mostly manipulated by the Britishers, they created this whole divide. It said that even Jinnah was surprised that the Britishers offered him a separate country. He was looking for some power, some kind of power balance on his own. But then when it was the Britishers' intent to divide the country, so they manipulated him. They said, you should have your own country, and created a country with with two parts separated by another country. Okay, verse 7. Ayam hikrata nirvesho janmakotya amasamaphi yad vyajhara vivasho nama swasti ayam hare. Ajmal had already atoned for all his sinful actions. Indeed, he has atoned not only for sins performed in one life, but those performed in millions of lives. For in a helpless condition, he chanted the holy name of Narayan. Even though he did not chant purely, he chanted without offense. And therefore, he is now pure and eligible for liberation. So in 13 verses, the 10 effects of the holy name are given. And this I will share. I will share the table of the 13 verses and the 10 effects. But essentially, this is the crux of the pastime, the glorification of the holy name by the Vishnu Dutas. So, if you notice, the Vishnu Dutas, they begin with chastising the Yamadutas. So the Yamdutas might protest that why are you saying all these things to us? That leaders and this and bad leaders and all that. Why are you criticizing our master? For this person, Ajmal, that he is such a sinful person, because of that you're saying all this to us? So the Vishnu Duta says that the reason we are criticizing you is because Ajamel is sinless. Why? Because he has performed atonement not only for the sins in this life, but for 10 million lives. Since he has chanted the name of the Lord, even though unconsciously. So this is the first effect of chanting, that all atonements are accomplished by the chanting of the holy name, not just of the present life, but millions of births. And the Vishnu Dutas also talk about the quality of the chanting that brings about this effect. They say that he chanted Vivashaha, that he chanted in a helpless state. So Srila Prabhupada, he writes a pretty long purport on this, that the Yamadutas considered only the external situation of Ajamel, since he was very sinful. And then he quotes three verses. He actually quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and quotes three verses that glorify the potency of the holy name. So you can see that in the purport, the very important verses that glorify the holy name. Okay, verse 8. एतेनिव हयघनोऽस्या कृतं स्यादगनिष्कृतं यदा नारायणयेति जगच्चतुरक्षरम्. The Vishnu Dutas continued, even previously, while eating, and at other times, this Ajamel would call his son, saying, "My dear Narayan, please come here." Although calling the name of his son, he nevertheless uttered the four syllables Na, Ra, Ya, Na. Simply by chanting the name of Narayan in this way, he is sufficiently atoned for the sinful reactions of millions of lives. So now they're giving pranam. So they stated the principle that by chanting the holy name, one is freed of sins. Now they're giving evidence that yes, Ajamel was in fact chanting the holy name. So this verse talks about the potency of the holy name, even if it is chanted unconsciously. Right. So Srila Prabhupada explains why the chanting of by Ajamel was offenseless. That to chant the holy name of the Lord just to counteract one's sinful activity or to commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name is offensive. Right. So this is a key point that will be expanded on in later verses. Okay, so the next two verses are the ones in which I wanted to spend some time and go in details. So let's read the verse 9 and 10. Stena Surapo Mitradruga Brahmaha Guru Talpagaha Striraj Pitra Gohanta Yecha Patakino Pare Sarvesham api agvatam idam eva suniskritam Nama Vyaranam Vishnor Yatastas Vishaya Matihi. The chanting of the holy name of Lord Vishnu is the best process of atonement for a thief of gold or other valuables, for a drunkard, for one who betrays a friend or relative, for one who kills a Brahman, for one who indulges in sex with the wife of his guru or another superior. It is also the best method of atonement for one who murders women, the king or his father, for one who slaughters cows, and for all other sinful men. Simply by chanting the holy name of Lord Vishnu, such sinful persons may attract the attention of the Supreme Lord, who therefore considers, because this man has chanted my holy name, my duty is to give him protection. Now, interestingly, Srila Prabhupada does not give a purport to these two verses. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes a 15-page purport to these two verses. Now, here I'm speculating as to why Prabhupada does not write a purport. One reason is that Vishwanath Chakravarti's he delves a lot into the intricacies of why Ajmer got liberated. And Srila Prabhupada wants to keep the message simple, that chant and become perfect. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur deals with a lot of philosophical intricacies that this pastime reveals. And he uses these two. He could have done it for any verse because the theme of the pastime is carried through, but he uses, for whatever reason, he uses these two verses. So I have done two things. One is that, and Vishwanath Chakravarti's purport is pretty involved because everything that he says, he gives shastric evidence, and that makes, and then sometimes his commentary is on the evidence that he gives. So what I've done is I've tried to distill it. I've removed a lot of the evidence and focused on the points that he has made. So I'll first summarize it, and then I have a PowerPoint that I will go through. So first, let's look at the summary. So what is the point that the Vishnudutas are making? That those who perform great sins can perfectly atone for these sins by the chanting of the holy name. Not only will they counteract the sin, but they also attract the mercy of the Lord. So these two things are the premise that is made in this verse. Then by this chanting, Ajamil attracted the attention of the Lord, which is why he quickly dispatched the Vishnu Dutas to protect him. Now the question might come that is the chanting of the holy name only effective at the time of death? Because death is a material condition. How can something spiritual be predicated on a material situation? And the answer is, the Vishnu Dutas say, while it appears that this was the result of the chanting at the time of death, this was only done to show the potency of the holy name. Actually, when Ajamel chanted the holy name for the very first time, he was freed of all sins, which means the first time he called his son Narayan, at that time he was freed of all sins. Subsequent chanting, so he did not stop calling his son Narayan. So it is mentioned that he would constantly, because he was so much absorbed in his son, he would constantly keep calling him, Narayan, come here and play with me. Narayan, what are you doing? So the subsequent chanting then caused Bhakti to appear. So the first chanting, it destroyed the sins, and subsequent chanting caused Bhakti to disappear. So then the question might be asked, so Vishnu Chakravarti presents it as a debate. He himself is asking questions and is giving the answers. So then the question that might be asked is that the cause of sins is sinful propensity. If the first chanting of the holy name destroyed the sins, then why did Ajamel continue to sin? And the answer is that his subsequent sins were done under past impressions. So just like a potter's wheel, even when the potter stops pushing it, it keeps rotating because of the prior momentum. So Ajamel, because of his past impressions, continued to sin. However, these sins did not generate any reactions. Specifically, they were like the bite of a toothless serpent. Then, other reasons why Ajamel continued to sin. So, the continuance of sins in Ajamel was the will of the Lord to preserve the faith of the materialistic people who are following Karm Kand and Gyan Kand. So, how do we understand this? That if Ajamel chanted the name once and he gave up immediately the performance of sinful activities, then people who are following karma and gyan kand, they would say, let us also chant. Let us give up this process of karma and gyan. But the Lord desires to protect them because they are there in the scriptures. And he wants to protect materialistic people taking to bhakti because they would commit offenses against the holy name. So they would be attracted to the holy name because of greedy motivations. And then instead of being neutral to the holy name, now they will become active offenders to the holy name. So in order to protect the materialistic people, the Lord caused the continuance of the sin. Then another reason that people, if Ajmail was immediately liberated at the first chanting of the holy name, people will go around saying that sinful Ajmail was liberated the first time he chanted Narayan. And other people will say that you are exaggerating. So they would inadvertently commit offenses against the holy name. So in order to protect those people, the Lord caused the continuance. Or they would say that since Ajmail was liberated simply by the chanting of the holy name, let us also lead a sinful life and be liberated by the chanting of the holy name. So let us enjoy now, and later on we will negate all the sins that we have committed simply by chanting the holy name. So in doing so, they would commit the sixth offense against the holy name, which is performing sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. Another reason that although the name once chanted destroyed the sins from the root, still, just like a fruit-bearing tree will bear fruits only at the right time, similarly, the holy name shall show the results of his fruit in the world with delay, and sometimes even in later lifetimes, in order to avoid the destruction of Bahirmukhi Shastra. And so this is a summation of the points that were made. That a tree will take its time to bear fruits. And because of the reasons that have been given, the holy name also takes time to show its results. However, in all cases, the holy name acts. It takes the person who chanted without offense to the Lord's abode. So ultimately, Ajamel, by the strength of Namabhas, attained Vaikuntha. Now, the objector might say, but what about so they will say that the Lord was trying to cause Ajamel to continue to sin to protect the holy name. But what about the opposite effect? That there are people that will say that look at Ajamel, he is saying Narayan, Narayan, and he is still committing sinful activities. So won't their faith in the holy name be diminished? And in response to this, Vishwanath Chakravarti has several scriptural statements. So this I'm not referring here, but he has many scriptures, verses from Padma Puran, Katyani Samhita, etc., wherein it says that one who doubts or disbelieves the potency of the holy name will suffer in hell. And then he gives a contemporary example. He says, you take a notice of Parishit Maharaj, that when Sukadev Goswami presented atonement as a cure for sins, he objected. But he did not object to Ajmel's performing sins after chanting the holy name. So Parikshit Maharaj, being properly situated, could make that distinction. So Chakravarti Pad continues that if one explains the facts in any other way, it is namaprad. So essentially he says this is the fifth offense to the holy name, to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. So ill-behaved Ajmail went to Vaikuntha by the power of Namabhas. But Smrita Brahmins or well-behaved scholars, even though chanting many names, still take rebirth. So the point that is being made is that even those who are not devotees, who are performing Karma Kand, they're also chanting the holy name. So if you look at the Karma Kand mantras, there is also glorification of Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu over there, and they are pious. So what about them? So Ajmail was ill-behaved. He was impious, and by chanting the holy name, he attained perfection. What about the pious people who are chanting the holy name? Why don't they get perfection? So the answer that Chakravarti Pad gives is that just like a great person will protect his sheltered followers based on the degree of their surrender, but he will not protect them if they offend him. So the reason why the Karam Kandis or the Gyan Kandis do not get the protection of the holy name is because they are active offenders of the holy name. How are they offenders? Because they are considering the name of Lord Krishna to be at the same level as that of the demigods. So if you see his reasoning, then one by one he will cover the 10 offenses. So uh, uh, the mood in which they are the karmis and gyanis is called guni bhava. So guni bhava means that there is a small component of inadvertent bhakti, but the major component is that of material desires and worship of the demigods. So in this way, the karmis and the gyanis, they are offensive to the holy name, because they are either bringing it down to the level of the devas, or they are using the holy name for material desires. Right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that they're committing 3 offenses. The 5th offense, they're giving some interpretation to the holy name. The 6th offense, considering the glories of the holy name to imagination. And the 8th offense, which is considering the chanting of the holy name to be like Karma Kanda. And they're also committing the 2nd offense, which is they're considering Krishna and the Devas to be at the same level. So then one asks, the person might ask, so then for such people, is there no effect of bhakti? And the answer is, there is. Bhakti Devi is the one that gives them the results of their activities. So how does a karmi make progress? Whether it is to the heavenly planets or whether it is opulences, is because of the small portion of bhakti that they take shelter of. And similarly for the jnanis. So even though the offenders, they attain the results of karma or jnana by secondary bhakti, their offenses are not destroyed. And the example that is given is that one may perform animal sacrifices given in the Vedas and attain heavenly planets, but the fault of the animal sacrifices still remains. So some say that such person who worship devas should be treated like karmis with sin and offense. Others say that Bhakti Devi places them even in a lower category because they do not have general surrender. So the reference he gives is to 923, that those who worship devotees of other gods worship them with faith, but they actually worship me, but in a wrong way. Right? So this section talks about the karmis and the jnanis, why they do not get the shelter of the holy name. Now, further objection is that if the karmis and jnanis, they are offenders to the holy name, then Ajmail himself was performing pious activities, karm kand, in the past. And the answer is yes. Ajmail previously was in this category. He was performing karm kand using bhakti as a secondary limb and an offender. However, he gave up all his pious activities in the association of the prostitute, and thus all his offenses ceased. So when offenseless bhakti is a limb of atonement, then she destroys the sin, and such people do not go to hell. However, non-devotees who offend the holy name, for them, bhakti gives no results. And when such people do not atone, they will undoubtedly go to hell. Right? So, for those who are performing atonement with bhakti as a limb, even if it is a minor limb, then such people are protected from going to hell. They may not get liberated, but they will not fall. But those who are performing atonement while offending either the holy name or the devotees, and offending means committing one of the 10 offenses, either considering it to be the same as the demigods or considering the holy name to be subject to interpretation, for them the bhakti gives them no results. And such people, if they do not perform the prescribed atonement, they will go to hell. However, devotees do not need to perform atonement because of guna bhakti, because they are primarily following the path of bhakti. So then the question is that, is there no hope for the karmis? And the answer is, if the karmis or the jnanis desist from nam aparadh and counter previous offenses by nam kirtan, then based on the degree of destruction of the offense, they get the karma, the fruits of the karma or jnana. If they're fortunate to get the association of devotees, then their offenses will be completely destroyed. And then Bhakti, being completely pleased with them, will bestow the full results of chanting of the holy name. And because of this, such persons will gradually ascend through the 14 stages of Bhakti and ultimately attain the Supreme Lord. So the question is, Ajmal did not go through these 14 stages. And the answer is that for persons who perform bhakti without offenses, the attainment of the Lord does not need to go through these 14 stages. They only have 2 stages. One stage is chanting the Lord's name, and the second is attaining the Lord. So such was the case of Ajmer. So then the objector might say that, but devotees also take rebirth. And the answer is the devotees fall in 2 categories, sa-aparadh and Niraprad Vaishnavas. So for devotees who have offenses, do not have their sins destroyed, and if they continue to sin, they are offenders. While they do not achieve the Lord, they do not go to hell. They will also continue to experience the undestroyed effects of the sins, but these effects will not be given to them by the law of karma, but by the will of Krishna. And sometimes, now these are exceptions here, sometimes devotees take rebirth as a service to Krishna. That even though they have no reason to take rebirth, but because they want to serve Krishna, they take rebirth. And sometimes the Lord forces them to take rebirth to increase their bhakti, much like a doctor gives a patient bitter medicine to cure. So then the conclusion is there is sukh and dukh for a Vaishnava. And the answer is yes, because of the offenses. So Vishwanath Chakravarti said that other than the 3 offenses, 5, 6, and 8, there are 2 other, which he says they are frightening offenses, which is the first offense, Vaishnava Prad, and 7th offense, performing sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. And because of that, the Vaishnava will also experience repeated birth and miseries. But such devotees who are chanting with offense will become free from offense by the process of continuing to chant. And what are the processes? Vishwanath Chakravarti said, if the Nama Pradis take Diksha with the Vaishnav Guru and take shelter of Keval or Pradhan Bhuta Bhakti and do Nam Kirtan to worship the Lord, after they become Vaishnav, then to the degree of the pleasure of Bhakti Devi, to that degree their offenses are destroyed, and Bhakti Mukhya Phal. So this is predominantly driven by Bhakti, the results will come up. Now the question may be, but Ajmal did not take a guru. And the answer is that the chanting of the holy name does not depend on piety. It does not depend on following regulative principles or diksha. The holy name is self-sufficient. In the case of Ajmal, while he did not accept a guru, he did not reject a guru. So he did not commit the 3rd offense, which is Guru Avigya. Now, the concluding points are, what about Nama Pradis belonging to other paths? So, summation, the demigod worshippers are just like other karmis. In fact, they are worse than karmis because they don't even have Guni Bhuta Bhakti. It means they don't have even the modicum of sliver of bhakti. There are those who are complete offenders, they are asuras, who have hatred for the Lord. And their plight is described in Bhagavad Gita 16:19, where the Lord says that those who are envious and mischievous, I cast them in the demoniac species of life. And the final is more of a, it's more of like a catch-all. So the final objection would be that Narad Muni in Bhagavatam 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 30 says that many people have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. So they attained perfection. And then there are those like the soldiers killed in Mahabharata or those killed by the Lord who were liberated. So the answer is that while there are principles, there are no absolute rules when the Lord personally appears. So it's in a way to set perspective of everything that has been spoken so far, that they are not to be considered as rules, when you're dealing with the persons. The holy name is Nama Prabhu. So the Lord is free to do whatever he wants. Right? So this kind of brings us to the end of that thought. Like I said, this is 15 pages of purports. I don't have the time to go through the PowerPoint, and maybe it's good so that it's a lot of information to digest. So I can start off the next discussion with the PowerPoint, and essentially it's a summation of the points that I made over here. I'll pause over here and firstly see if there is any questions or if there is any guidance, just in terms of uh, how would you like to see it?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Regarding Namabhas can be carefully avoiding offenses, but still inadvertently committing some offenses not knowingly, or that's also considered as Namabhas, right, Prabhu? It's one step above the Namaparad. And in this case, Ajamil is calling Narayan without even having an intention of calling the Lord, but just uttering the holy name without any intention. And that is also considered as Namabhas. So just I'm trying to see the equality of, or the weightage given in two different, on the one sense, when we start chanting the holy name, we are committing offenses. And then we slowly make progress through great endeavor. We come to the stage of Namabhas. But on the other hand, a person who is just calling the Lord's name without even having an intention of calling the Lord, that's also called as Namabhas. So, I mean, it's so difficult to equate. Can you shed some light on that? I don't know that I'm clear in my question.
Yes, Prabhu, thank you. So that is in effect the essence of the pastime, that uh, 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 so Namabhas, maybe I can correct a little bit. So Namaprad is offensive chanting. Namaprad is offenseless chanting. So there are no offenses at that stage. And Shuddha Nam is offenseless chanting with full understanding of the potency of the holy name. Right. So Ajmail was at the state of Namabhas. Now, his was a very particular situation, because he became offenseless because of a confluence of circumstances. And that's what the whole discussion curtails, that yes, he was performing pious activities, but he gave up those pious activities. He was performing sinful activities, but not on the strength of the holy name. And he had nothing to do with the holy name. So he was not glorifying it, but he was not condemning it. So Ajmal's situation was that his chanting was offenseless. He did not have an understanding of the potency of the holy name, but nevertheless, he was not committing any offenses. So the whole Ajmal pastime is basically geared towards developing this understanding of chanting without offense. Right now, we might say that Ajmal was lucky that he's performing sinful activities and ignorance is bliss. So because of that, he attained perfection. We are unlucky. We came into Krishna consciousness, so we know the potency of holy name. So we are performing offenses. But that's why the other part of the discussion comes in, that keeping Ajmal's situation aside, it is almost impossible for one to chant the holy name without offenses. They will inadvertently commit some offenses. If they're doing demigod worship and then they say, Narayana Namastave. So along with that, they will say, Indra Namastave, Vayu Namastave. So they will equate the holy name. Or they will say, what is that? There is that Narayan Katha, right? What is it called? Some Katha that
Satyanarayan.
Satyanarayan Katha, right? So they do Satyanarayan Katha. It's all Lord Narayan, but all for material purposes, right? So whether the person is pious, and then Vishnu Chakravarti talks about impious persons also, that those who are impious, by nature, they will be offensive to the holy name. So, accidentally coming to the situation of offenseless chanting is like winning the lottery ticket, which is what Ajmal did. But the recommended path is that one progresses through offensive chanting, reaches through to offenseless chanting, and then matures into purified chanting.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. We also hear from Prabhupada's pastimes or in our movement how they used to make fun of people who go on streets and Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Guru Maharaj narrates this, right? How some children of this standing in the school campus um, used to make fun of the devotees who used to go on Harinam, but then later on they appreciated. One person came to Guru Maharaj and then congratulated him or appreciated him, saying that you still doing the good work, and we used to make fun of you. You are very tolerant. So he was more appreciative and realized the mistake. And Maharaj was telling that how the holy name has its potency, even though they were making fun of the holy name.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Same thing is said about Chandkazi, right? He got the mercy of Mahaprabhu. And in Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that because when they would talk about the Hindus, they would say they're haram, which is a derogatory word, but it contains the word Ram in it. Or they would talk in anger that these Krishna bhaktas are useless. But because of that, they were chanting the holy name offenselessly because they didn't know any better. And they ultimately, at least Chandkazi got the mercy of Mahaprabhu. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Go ahead, Prabhuji.
As you have said, it's practically impossible to chant without offense, especially when you try to chant and then the mind goes away. Even though we okay, like we say, we don't worship demigod and all that. We don't believe in karma kanda and all that. And okay, in those things, I'm not saying I'm 100% sure that I don't believe in karma kanda or demigod and all that, but at least I'm not fearful of them, anything like that. But what I'm trying to say is, even though we put all our endeavor in trying to chant, still, it's we start correctly, and then after some time we deviate. The mind goes there, the mind goes there. But in this type of situation, that means every day, I'm committing offenses, and we know is the mean to attain the goal is a mean, and then with the same mean we attain the goal. It's like a vicious circle like that. But still, we are chanting and committing offenses every day. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation.
So a couple of thoughts, sorry, Prabhu, couple of thoughts over here. So when we do the 10 offenses, inattentive chanting is not a part of the 10 offenses, right? It kind of comes as the 11th. After you do all the 10 offenses, the 11th offense, it is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. There's two ways to understand it. One is that it is said that inoffensive chanting is the root of all the other 10 offenses. Because of inattentive chanting, the other 10 offenses appear. Now, inattentive chanting in itself is not an offense. So there are two ways to understand it. That if you're chanting inattentively, it will not allow you to access the full potency of the holy name. So there is an absence of negative and a presence of positive. The 10 offenses, they create negativity. But offenseless chanting will not allow you to access the full potency of the holy name. So you are not a nam aparadhi per se, so you will not suffer from the consequence of the offenses. But the potency of the holy name is that it will give you pure devotional service, etc. That you will not be able to access. Now, from a practical perspective, so I'm going back to the first. From a practical perspective, one who chants inattentively is because they're contaminated by one or more of the 10 offenses. Specifically, that they consider the glories of the holy name to be imagination. They give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. So because they're contaminated by one of these offenses, so they don't understand that the holy name is not different from the Lord, and thus they chant inattentively. So that's why inattentive chanting is considered as an offense, because it can both be the cause and effect of offenses. But in itself, inattentive chanting is not an offense. You follow that? It's a little.
Yeah, thank you so much. But there's another thing also. Let's say somebody start to feel the connection and start to really feel that I am very attentive, I am this, I am that. Then there's another thing that become, like you may say ahankar, like, oh, I'm getting there, I'm getting there, I'm getting there. Then there's another thing that can come also, that can be very negative as well.
Yeah, so those are bhakti anumukh anarthas, right? Because of devotional service, one gets anarthas there. Can happen for chanting, can happen for other thing also. But uh, uh, from our personal examples, so look at, I can speak about myself. So from the time that I've started chanting, I've been chanting inattentively. So I've been chanting inattentively for more than 20 years, but I'm still able to chant. So what does that mean? It means that inattentive chanting is not going to take away the mercy of the holy name. It may not give me access to the entire mercy. Because if the former was true, then somebody like me would have not been able to chant for many, many years ago now. And I continue to chant inattentively. My aspiration is to not, but still, I continue to chant inattentively, but still I'm able to chant. Right? So for devotees who are chanting inattentively, it is not an offense. They're not getting full access to the holy name. But yes, there are people who chant inattentively because of, and there are people who come to our bhakti vikshas and all that, and they may chant, but they say Sab Bhagwan Ek hai. So I chant Krishna's name, I chant Hanuman's name, I chant this, or they say that I'm chanting to get some material benefits out of it. In those cases, inattentive chanting will actually take away the ability to chant, because that's where they're committing offenses there. So that distinction needs to be there. Okay, so we'll stop here.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. We'll stop here, and um, next week we'll go with the PowerPoint. It's a reiteration of the points that were made here, but it's in a more structured philosophical way. Right here, it's in Vishnu Chakravarti presents it as a conversation, so you can ask questions and get answers. And there, the PowerPoint, it presents it just as a flow of philosophy. So good to understand both aspects. Okay, so we'll end over here. Thank you so much. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna.
And Prabhuji, next week we can still ask questions, right, Prabhuji, on the discussion on Namavas and
Yes, of course, Prabhu. Sure.
thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.